Hey guys, the Wolf Den here, and today we'll be unboxing and reviewing the new all-plastic Warhammer The Horus Heresy and Age of Darkness Imperial Cerastus Knight Acheron. We'll be starting by taking a look at the lore for this rare pattern of Imperial Knight in the grim darkness of the far future. Then we'll be taking a look at the history of this model in our universe, with the various incarnations of the Imperial Knight Acheron that have been released by Games Workshop and Forge World over the years. Then we'll examine the box and its contents, and finally we'll take a look at the finished Knight Acheron, with some size comparisons and my overall thoughts on the model and building experience to sum everything up. Let's get into it. We had the day won, by the gods we did, until that thing came out of the castle walls as the drawbridge slammed down. Like some giant drake, it stormed out of the rubble of their keep, spraying fire and brimstone this way and that, my men melting like they were made of wax, its mouth full of razor-sharp teeth, cutting our vehicles to ribbons. We didn't stand a chance, I tell you, we didn't stand a chance. Confessions of Cultist Mercenary during the Heresy on Planet Harvest, M41. The Imperial Knight Cerastus Acheron is a member of the Cerastus subgroup of Imperial Knights, which are massive, heavily armed and armored combat walkers. Differing from their Questoris and Dominus pattern cousins, are much older patterns of war machines, specifically having seen combat during the Great Crusade and the terrible years of the Horus Heresy that followed. Similar to their cousins, the Cerastus Knights are piloted by a single noble seated on their throne mechanicum, a device that allows a noble pilot to bond and essentially merge with his or her suit of armor, thereby allowing for a much greater degree of control over his or her knight than traditional control methods. It is here, however, that the Cerastus suits show their differences. While the knight suits of the more common Questoris and Dominus patterns were originally in their creation and by design machines made to protect, Cerastus suits were created for a much darker purpose. These powerful war machines, both better protected and faster than other knight suits, were seemingly created with the purpose of destruction in mind, being weapons to conquer and to destroy those who stood in their way. The Imperial Knight Acheron is seemingly this idea made manifest. Acheron-class knights were designed with one simple purpose: destruction, to inspire fear in the enemies of mankind as it bathes their lands in flame. These war machines are terror engines. Their presence on the field of battle signals that a knight house has come to scour any trace of their foes from wherever they may hide, and to expect no mercy, as the Acheron and its flames will spare no one, for its targets are to be exterminated. Acheron suits of knight armor, as terrifying as they are rare sights on the battlefield, due to the difficulty of their construction, even dating back as far as the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy. They are rarely fielded in large numbers. However, even the presence of a single Acheron could inspire fear in the hearts and minds of those standing before it. To accomplish its mission of total extermination of the enemy, the Knight Acheron is armed with a massive Acheron-patterned flame cannon, usually situated on its left arm. These massive flamethrowers, equal in power to that of Titan-class flamethrower weapons, project an incredibly hot torrent of all-consuming flame against an enemy target, engulfing them completely and reducing them to ash. These massive weapons are fueled by a hose connected to the knight's body, which in turn connect to a fuel tank on the knight's back. A massive Reaper chain fist is mounted on its other arm. This upscaled version of the chain weapons found throughout the Imperium are designed to destroy heavily armored targets. Those seeking to escape the wrath of its heavy weapons are quickly cut down by its twin-linked heavy bolter, installed into the chain fist. These weapons allow the Acheron to simultaneously destroy enemy war machines, fortifications, or structures at close range, as well as dealing with infantry-level threats that might otherwise threaten its tall frame. Finally, a powerful ion shield protects the Knight Acheron from harm. However, the power that the Acheron holds does not come without a cost. The machine spirit that resides within its mighty frame resonate with the memories of devastating wars, massacres, and the untold slaughter of countless victims beneath its grim visage. Their machine spirits call for their pilots to destroy, to abandon the shackles of their morality, and to give in to their most destructive impulses, to leave no trace of the enemy alive, and bay for the blood of their foes like a rabid beast. Only the strongest minds in a knight household would have any chance of keeping this machine spirit at bay, and by extension, their knight suits in check, especially during combat with the enemy, when the voices of the machine spirit are at their loudest. These impulses leave the Knight Acheron a suit often shunned by most members of a noble knight household. Those who often enter it rarely do so out of choice, but out of obligation, a somber commitment to their duty, and for their mission that is for the good of their knightly household. However, there are some pilots that take to their suits of Acherons almost willingly, tortured souls who have seen countless atrocities. These nobles who enter into the Acheron's embrace do so for the promise of slaughter and the inferno of destruction that the Acheron is capable of unleashing upon its enemies, as a way to soothe their spirits. Thus, it can certainly be said that the Imperial Knight Acheron is a reaper of lives, a merciless destroyer whose single purpose is to ignite the lands of the enemy and scour them completely clean, leaving them no trace of any form of resistance against them or their households whatsoever. Now that we've gone over the lore of the Cerastus Knight Acheron, let's take a look at the history of this knight model kit in our universe. The Imperial Knight Acheron is one of the few Imperial Knight models not to be able to trace its history directly back to the original creation of the Imperial Knights during the late 1980s. Knights, in their various forms, were created as support units for the mighty Titans in their own original game, Adeptus Titanicus, in its first iteration. These minis being the Imperial Knights in the epic scale. As you can see, they certainly were a strange bunch, having exaggerated proportions that look very strange even by Warhammer 40k standards. The Cerastus Knights Acheron's first appearance was much later. The original Knight Acheron was an all-resin model kit created by Forge World and released around the closing months of 2014. Designed for expert hobbyists, the Acheron was certainly an imposing model. I refer to this model having been released during the Forge World Dark Ages, in which very expensive and difficult model kits were released by Forge World with barely any instructions included outside of brief photos and summary guides, as it was expected that the hobbyist who purchased them knew what they were doing and not much help was given outside of basic summary photos included on the instructions. Thus, the Knight Acheron was born, and it was released and remained relatively the same in its resin model form for quite some time, along with several other all-resin Imperial Knight kits. However, in 2018, Epic had seen a relaunch under the name Adeptus Titanicus The Horus Heresy, which was an all-new, all-plastic reimagining of the original game, taking place in the Age of Darkness, with new, higher-detailed, and larger minis. This time, the Acheron saw a new release in all-plastic alongside its fellow knights in this newer, larger, but still pretty small form. Adeptus Titanicus would see a more epic-themed revival a few years later, in which the game would be rebranded to its current form as of 2026, known as Legions Imperialis, in which the Acheron would appear once again in its same smaller plastic form alongside its fellow knights. Last but not least, the modern Age of Darkness and 28mm scale Cerastus Knight Acheron was announced to be coming to plastic on July 1st, 2023. This all-new model kit was redesigned from the ground up to be an intuitive and gorgeous plastic model, while retaining the design cues and philosophies of its original resin Forge World model. The new model even features new ranges of flexibility and posability, as well as an all-plastic fuel tube connecting from the body of the knight to its massive flame-spewing primary weapon and to the fuel tank on the knight's back, as the original resin model had a all-resin fuel pipe which had to be bent into shape with a hairdryer or boiling water. This new model was released in September of 2023, and it's this model that we'll be taking a look at in this review. So here we have the Horus Heresy Knight House's Cerastus Knight Acheron still in its box. And what a gorgeous box it is. A large one too. It can barely even fit into my camera frame. On the front of the box, we have this absolutely incredible illustration of the Knight Acheron flanked by several Mark VI Space Marines. And I have to say that I kind of want to cut this box art out and frame it. It really captures the majesty of the Acheron. Flipping the box over, we have a finished view of the Acheron all painted up in this lovely dark green, cream, and gold color. We also have smaller snapshot views of a close-up of the knight's head, as well as the noble seated inside of the model on its throne mechanicum, and can be removed once the build is complete for a miniature diorama. Looking down, we have two example paint schemes with the labels on how to make them. We have House Virani and House Divine. And lastly, we have a look at the amazing Cerastus Knight transfer sheet, which offers an incredible amount of transfers to use on your knight or throughout your Warhammer collection on other minis, which we'll be taking a closer look at in a few minutes. So, with the box out of the way, let's dive into the contents of the Cerastus Knight Acheron. So here we have the first item out of the box, and it's our large instruction booklet. For such a large and complicated model, I'd argue that knights are probably some of the most complicated models the Games Workshop sells outside of the resin Forge World kits. The instructions make the modeling process and building process enjoyable and really fun. You have explanations on alternate parts, where to swap them, how to change the pose of the knight's legs if you'd like, and everything is labeled correctly, which coincide with the numbers that you find on the sprues themselves. The modeling instructions are also incredibly accurate to the sprue numbers that you find as well, and there are no major mistakes or mislabeling of parts as far as I can tell, which really help the build process along. As sometimes with kits this big, there tend to be a mistake here or there, but the Acheron's instructions are absolutely perfect. The instructions are very helpful in breaking this beast down into bite-sized steps, so when it doesn't feel like you're making a lot of progress, you really are, especially on the legs, which can certainly help to not overwhelm a builder when working on a model this size. So the first sprue we have out of the box is the interesting flexible tube sprue, which all of these little parts combined are going to make the flexible hose that feeds the knight's primary weapon. These will link together and are actually really posable and flexible once the build is complete. And this feature reminds me a lot of the stuff that you usually find on Gundam and posable model kits, which for a static Games Workshop model is incredible. And needless to say, it certainly beats the solid one-piece tube found on the resin Forge World version of this model kit. Here we have the second sprue, which is pretty big as you can see. However, I'm noticing that once again, there's that appearance of that strange bent plastic that it's been showing up in quite a few of my Games Workshop kits lately. That being said, it doesn't really affect the parts, which is very similar to how it was in the Deimos Rhino kit. However, for how expensive these model kits are, there really shouldn't be any kind of bend or flaw in the plastic. The parts themselves are extremely well detailed, and you can see that you get quite a lot of alternate loyalist, neutral, traitor, and mechanicum aligned symbols and hard transfers to really customize your knight and to make it your own by showing what allegiance it belongs to. I'll be modeling mine as a loyalist household, but you can certainly mix and match to really make your knight your own. Our next sprue has a lot more parts, a lot of pistons and connecting joints, as well as more armor plates and choices of armor in various allegiances for our knights. Next sprue houses the massive flame cannon and the Reaper chain fist, as well as parts for the head and more intricate detail parts for the arms and weapon mounts. The detail on the flame cannon and the chain fist are actually incredible, especially to find this kind of detail in hard plastic is really cool. Another sprue of leg and optional armor plates for your knight. I would say roughly half of this kit is for the chassis and lower leg portions, so there are quite a lot of parts for these assemblies. However, each part is labeled and you won't really notice while you're building it. And it certainly doesn't feel like a slog like other kits or kits with tracks like the various tank models. Each step feels like it has a purpose, and even though there are quite a lot of them to build each leg up, the parts go together really well and is really super satisfying to watch your knight come together. And lastly, we have a special sprue that is the final detail sprue for the Cerastus Knights. This one featuring the distinctive round carapace armor for the top of the model, as well as the pilot and the throne mechanicum, which, as I mentioned before, you can actually leave unglued into the chassis itself, so you can actually remove it and display it separately as a little diorama. The detail on the pilot and the throne mechanicum is actually kind of crazy how well detailed these parts are for being so small, and I appreciate Games Workshop doing this, as it adds another layer of complexity, as well as life and realism to this model kit, instead of just having an empty cockpit. Last but not least, we have the base for the knight, followed by the gorgeous Cerastus Knight transfer sheet, which is in 2 parts, which is covered in incredibly detailed knight transfers, icons, glyphs, symbols, and other designs to be used throughout your knight collection and on your Cerastus Knight specifically. It actually comes in 2 parts, and here's the second part, which offers an even wider array of symbols and transfers for your collection. I think my favorites have to be the Griffins, the Scorpions, and the Cyber Wolf Skulls. In addition, these icons are outlined per household to match the lore, but nothing is stopping you from using these transfers for different projects throughout your armies, which I'm certainly thinking of using them for my own projects as well, rather than for their dedicated knight households. I honestly can't get over how awesome this transfer sheet is. Both of these sheets are absolutely incredible, and we definitely need more like them. These remind me of the gorgeous Forge World Legion transfer sheets that Games Workshop currently sells and that Forge World used to sell, which are and were these massive transfer sheets that had hundreds of icons and details on each page. These remind me of them, and I'm really, really glad that they gave us all of these options to use, as Knight Heraldry and Knight Household Heraldry and even Titan Legio Heraldry can be really complicated to try to freehand by yourself, especially for a novice or intermediate level painter. So the fact that they gave us all this amazing range and variety of stuff is incredible, and I'm really thankful that they included this. Now that we've gone through all of the content of the box itself, let's take a look at the finished Imperial Knight Cerastus Acheron. And here we have the finished Cerastus Knight Acheron, and what a tall model it is. It's so large that I'm having trouble fitting the entire model into my camera frame. I've went ahead and loosely fitted a few of the detail pieces on mine so I can paint them separately later. You may see my knight lose a few pieces as the video goes on. Taking a 360-degree view of the entire model shows off how imposing it is, even without mounting it on its base. The long, slender frame is focused by these detail legs, which really help it stand out from the other types of knight models. This model really outdoes itself in the leg pose department, which really allows you to choose how you want your own knight to be standing. I chose the standard pose, which is a striding pose for mine. but the instructions offer ways on how to get different poses for your Cerastus Knight Acheron's legs. Rotating the model around, we have a view of its massive primary weapon, as well as the flexible cable that connects it to the fuel tank on the Knight's back. Just doing a basic overview of the kit, you can really see how detailed packed it is. I'd say even more so than the normal Questoris patterns. One really nice feature is the posability of this model kit. Here on the arm that houses the Acheron flame cannon, you can see the range of motion that you're able to move the arm with. It can move up and down and side to side. All of these while being unglued in one permanent position, and really allows you to do a lot of different poses for your model kit, even when the model is completed. Next, we have a quick closer look at the flame cannon itself. It's really nicely detailed, from the grills on the barrel to the tiny details near the mounting part on the gun itself. It's really full of detail all over, and for a weapon this size, that's actually really incredible. So here we have a quick demonstration of the flexible tubing on the Knight's back. Be warned, the part that does connect into the Knight's back is a sort of hook and loop connection that is rather delicate, in which it connects under the fuel barrels. I ended up breaking mine just trying to position the cable so it can move with the arm because I applied a bit too much force to it, but a decent amount of glue inside should be enough to get it sitting how you want without worrying about the cable breaking or not. Normally handling your model is fine. I was just a bit too rough when I was trying to fix the position of the cable itself. Once the cable is sitting roughly where it's supposed to be, you shouldn't have any problems. As you can see, the cable is extremely flexible, and it can accommodate a variety of poses for the flame cannon while remaining loose, which is really cool on such a static model. There's even tiny details on the fuel dials on the fuel tanks as well on the Knight's back, which is really incredible for a kit this big to have this level of detail on its smallest parts. The fuel hose, as you can see, is incredibly flexible, and I'm able to move it with my fingers, even though I've already selected a pose for the model itself, and the way that the hose is able to match the flame cannon's movements is very cool. And you can certainly see how the individual links come together to make up the entire fuel chain. Next, we have a look at the massive Reaper chain fist on the Acheron's other arm. Much like the flame cannon, the chain fist is superposable as it uses the joints found on the other arm for this one as well, which really gives it a great range of motion for determining what pose you want. Of course, it's a bit heavy in its current state, so it won't naturally sit flat without a bit of glue. But as it stands, it has a great range of motion for poses, so if you wanted to make it cutting through something or having it posed at its side, you can certainly do that. That being said, you do have to pick a pose more so than the other arm that you want, and does it remain as flexible as the arm that holds the flame cannon. This is due to a variety of small pistons in which connects the chain fist to the elbow of the Knight. Though I don't see why you couldn't leave these pistons off and add a bit of glue or putty to make the arm more posable without losing all of the articulation. I've noticed that the pistons for the elbow are extremely delicate and will bend and flex without a lot of effort, even for a supposedly straight pose. So I would be very careful in which the pose you do pick, and then attach the pistons so you don't break them. I came pretty close to breaking a few of mine purely just by experimenting with the pose. So I would certainly recommend deciding beforehand which pose you want, gluing it, and then adding the smaller details so you don't risk breaking them. One of the small touches that I love on this arm is that the teeth are facing in two different directions. One set is facing forward and the other is facing backwards for maximum cutting potential. Getting a closer look at the front of the Knight and the carapace itself, you can see how detailed the armor plates are above and below on this Knight are. Especially the carapace, which has lots of rivets and small details, as well as the armor plates on the chest. I would recommend not gluing these permanently until you're done painting them, given how that they have a lot of trim and flat areas, which could be difficult to reach. The head has many visual sensors that look like eyes hiding just underneath the mask, and I loosely kept the mask and the head glued on mine so that I can paint the head and these separately and then glue them all together when they're all done. The head itself is posable as well, and with the hinge on the back allows it to move to the left and to the right at a pretty decent range, even once the build is complete, so you can choose what way the knight's head is facing. I'd imagine that this is tied to what the pilot is seeing inside of the knight when they sweep left or right. As far as extra accessories go, we actually have quite a lot for this knight. The first of the accessories being this spare banner and flag, which is neat as it does come blank for you to put your own designs or heraldry or decals from the decal sheet on. The instructions recommend putting it under the torso, however, I would think it would look just as cool mounted under the flame cannon or under the Reaper chain fist as well, like how banners are mounted on the larger knight kits. Here we have an example of some of the Loyalist and Heretic armor plates, featuring a sculpted Eye of Horus on the right side to give traitor players an option to have their knights to serve Horus. This symbol appears in the form of several hard transfer icons and armor plates throughout the knight. If you don't use them on the model itself, they offer a variety of basing material for your knight, or other models in your collection as well if you choose not to use them. The knight itself also comes with a set of Loyalist hard transfer decals and armor plates as well, which you can see mounted on mine just take the form of smooth plates with trim, and you also get several unaligned generic Loyalist and Mechanicum House icons as well to really customize the appearance of your knight and give it a bit more flavor. And here we have a quick look at the knight mounted on its base. I won't be basing mine personally, purely out of preference for large and titanic size models that can support their own weight. Usually anything a knight size or above in my collection will usually stand by itself if it can support its own weight. But as you can see, the Acheron definitely struggles a bit to stay on its base, given how large of its footprint this is, even using the standard position of the legs found in the instructions, so you may want to use a bigger base if you plan on displaying this model. Probably my favorite feature of this model is just under the front carapace armor, which can remain unglued to the chassis like so if you choose to do so. By simply removing it and popping it out of place, you can look into the inner workings of your model to reveal your noble sitting on their throne mechanicum at the controls of this fearsome war machine. Better still, by leaving this small section unglued, you can even remove it as well for separate display options for a mini diorama next to the model itself. As you can see, the cockpit is crammed with details, down to the kind of visor your noble is wearing. You can see the details on the throne, the control console, and all over the noble pilot themselves, which offer unique modeling opportunities. You could also certainly chaos your pilot up to have them fused into the infernal heart of their war machine, like the Forge World Titan models, if you so choose. It should be noted that the noble is actually a separate piece from the throne mechanicum, which is actually really cool. That being said, it was a bit tricky to actually get my noble to go together, given how exactly you need the arms and the legs to line up with the torso. A point to note, the noble is really tightly put into there once they're installed into the throne mechanicum and put into the cockpit. So I would recommend painting them first and then putting them down onto the throne once everything is painted, or painting each cockpit assembly first and then putting it all together, as it doesn't allow much room for brushwork once it's assembled like this. But it's a really cool addition to the model that you can take this cockpit piece in and out for display or just to show off the pilot inside. Now on to a quick few size comparisons. First, we have the Knight Acheron compared to a standard modern Tactical Marine from the 40k Tactical Marine box set. We have the Knight Acheron compared to the older style of Cataphractii armor. Even this larger suit of armor is dwarfed even by the Acheron's flame cannon, not to mention the Knight itself. Next, we have the Knight compared to a Mars pattern Games Workshop Rhino, which despite vehicle scaling being a bit strange in 40k and 30k, they scale excellently to each other, with the Deimos pattern Rhino for 30k being about the same size as the 40k Rhino. They scale really well together next to this imposing model, as you can see. And finally, we have a comparison between the Cerastus Knight Acheron and a Questoris pattern Knight from my own collection, just missing a few small detail bits at the moment. As tall as the Questoris pattern frame is, it's dwarfed by the massive Acheron. So if you're looking for a uniquely outfitted and looking knight for your collection, the Cerastus Acheron may in fact be the knight for you, if you have several Questoris patterns and are wanting to spice up your collection a bit. Now it's time for my overall thoughts on the Cerastus Knight Acheron to wrap things up. Category 1, Build. For the build category, I would have to give the Cerastus Knight Acheron a 5 out of 5. The build for such a massive and imposing kit is honestly flawless. There are no problems with how the model goes together, and the model is broken up into many small sub-assemblies that come together into the larger parts and offer an enjoyable building experience. I certainly enjoyed the building experience, and I believe anyone who picks this kit up will as well. The flexible joints and posability options really give the builder options on how to model your Acheron, and a good portion of these articulation options exist even after the model itself is completed. Looks and appearance. The Cerastus Knight Acheron scores a 5 out of 5 in the looks and appearance category as well. The model looks flawlessly like the images on the box, as well as in the instructions provided. There's also numerous extra parts to really personalize your model, and the Acheron does not disappoint in the appearance department. The model is coated in small details all around its massive frame, while also offering plenty of opportunities for conversions or serious customization right out of the box. Material quality. The Knight Acheron scores a 4.5 out of 5 for the material quality category. Games Workshop plastic is incredible and offers a great potential for customization, as well as straight modeling right out of the box with no prep work necessary. That being said, the sprues having been bent is something that I've noticed is becoming a lot more common, especially with these 30k kits. And honestly, for a kit of this size and caliber, and certainly cost, having bent sprues right out of the box is unacceptable to me personally, and is incredibly disappointing. However, the model material itself is excellent and leaves nothing to be desired when you're working with it, and it goes together very easily just using standard plastic or super glue. Accessories and decals. 5 out of 5. Again, the Acheron scores incredibly high here. The Acheron, while not coming with any weapon options per se, as this kit is for a specific variant of Imperial Knight that doesn't normally come with weapon options, the model itself comes with many alternate armor plates and panels, as well as numerous hard transfers for different allegiances for your model, which greatly reduce the amount of free handwork if one wanted to make a Chaos Aligned Knight, for example, for either games of the Horus Heresy or games of 40k. The fact that the cockpit can also be removed, as well as having a modeled in Knight pilot, is also incredible, which again offers conversion opportunities, or to simply have a separate display next to the Knight itself. The decal sheets here are also beyond incredible. The fact that you get not one but 2 sheets, which themselves offer different options and ranges of symbols, glyphs, and transfers, really allow you to make your own knight your own, while offering numerous other transfers for different knight houses and allegiances for other knights in your collection or army, or to be used across your Games Workshop model ranges as well for different projects. They really remind me of the old out-of-print Forge World decal sheets, as well as the ones for the different legions, so I really appreciate them going above and beyond, especially for a kit of this price. Finally, for the instruction category, 5 out of 5. The Knight's instruction booklet is perfect, with all the parts matching up to their numbers located on the sprues themselves. The Knight's instruction book, despite being massive itself, really breaks the model down into bite-sized pieces and sub-assemblies, which really allow the modeler to enjoy working on this kit, and does not feel stressful like its previously older resin Forge World model counterpart. The pictures are clear and each step feels enjoyable. You really end up seeing how the knight itself goes together while not being overwhelmed. There are also small hints on how to customize your knight's poses and leg positions as well, which really allow for unique modeling opportunities in how you want your knight posed and built as you put it together. So with all of these different categories in mind, would I recommend the Knight Acheron for collectors of the Horus Heresy and the Age of Darkness? Absolutely, I certainly would. This model is honestly incredible, and it blew away all of my expectations when I built it. I've never worked on the Forge World Acheron, but this model is certainly a worthy replacement to that one's legacy. This model has a unique presence that, unlike the other Knight chassis, and offers an excellent building experience. I wouldn't recommend this Knight as someone's first model, of course, as it is fairly complex and large and comes with quite a few pieces, but these new Knight models are excellent for someone with a bit of hobbying experience under their belt, as the instructions and bite-sized sub-assemblies really make this model doable. The amazing number of posing options, as well as the additions like the flexible ammo belts and numerous sculpted on details, combined with the range of articulation for the knight's limbs, head, and arms, really makes it unique among all of the knight models that I built. The incredible Forge World quality of the decal sheets, as well as the various hard transfers and icons, is really the perfect addition to this model, and really ties it together in allowing a modeler or collector to really get the most out of their model without requiring 1,000 hours of work. I'd almost say that this amount of detail in this model almost gives me a feeling of putting a Titan-sized model together, with all of the interlocking limb pieces, the articulation, the small details, the inner cockpit, as well as the posability of the arms and legs. Really feels like you're putting a Titan together. And I said that to myself several times while putting the Acheron together, and I said, wow, it really almost feels like I'm building a Warhound Titan here, or I got similar experiences while putting my Reaver Titan together. So I'd almost say that perhaps this is a small test of them testing the waters for perhaps bringing a Warhound Titan into plastic. But that being said, I was certainly impressed with this model, and I certainly believe you would be too, and I would recommend picking this Knight up for your collection if you enjoy a different flavor of Knight, and I would certainly recommend picking this Knight up for your collection.